Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to webinar 6. Today we're looking at vehicles and route assessment in the series, which if you've attended the previous few webinars, bit of a slightly change of direction here. But I guess what we're trying to do now, we've talked a little bit in the previous webinars about the introduction, I suppose, to bridge assessment and some of the concepts in there which Neil Lake took us through. And so now what we're trying to do is make that link between those bridge assessments and then what happens in the actual access assessment space, including looking at routes. So a different panel this morning. Got Will Beaumont with us. And Will, if I can just get you to share that presentation from beginning, we'll get it up on the screen a bit bigger so we can, hopefully everyone can see it there.
Sorry, Todd, I thought it was. Let me just get it back up again.
You're right. We always have a few technology problems. At least we're not on mute. We managed to get through that one. So yeah, so just while we're getting that up, as I said, it's a bit of a change of direction here, and I guess what we're trying to do is link that through to the process that you guys do in terms of looking at consent requests. All right, so we just jump to the next slide. All right, so here's the topics. Hopefully you're familiar with the first 5 webinars that we've undertaken in this series. Today, as I said, number 6, looking at vehicles and route assessment. And then we've only got 3 more to go, which you see there as well on the list of topics. So very quickly, presenters today, still got me here, Todd Willard, the Project Manager for Strategic Local Government Asset Assessment Project, and joining us today is Will Beaumont. So Will will do a bit of an intro when his piece comes up, but he'll be joining us from the Access team to take us through that route assessment side of things. So thanks for joining us today, Will, for taking the time out to help out in this webinar.
Not a problem. Good to be here, Todd. Hey, everyone.
All right, so let's kick on. So just very quickly, the agenda for today, quick welcome. What I'm going to talk about, well, actually, what we felt was the better way to do this was for Will just to give you a bit of an overview of the routing functionality in the portal. Now, I know probably a lot of you have been using this for some time. It can be a little bit tricky at times, and so we thought it might be just a good opportunity just to have a look at that, and also look at how we actually go about creating alternate routes, which is sometimes something that's required. And I guess in terms of the work that we're doing around our bridge assessments, you know, there may be cases where perhaps a bridge is okay and we can go with the route that's being proposed. But in other cases, we might find that perhaps the vehicle that's being requested to travel over that structure may not be suitable. So we'll have a look at how that alternate routing process works. So we'll take you through that. So that's the bulk of today. What I want to talk about then is a little bit about where we're going with the portal functionality in the future. So I think there's a couple of important pieces there that we need to have a bit of a, I guess, give you a bit of a sneak peek on in terms of what's happening going forward over the next 6 to 12 months. And then, as usual, we'll have a brief period of time for questions and answers. So look, again, if you've got any questions as we're going along, just drop them into the chat and we'll go through those at the end of the session. If you haven't already, please mute your microphone so we don't get any of that awful feedback, which seems to happen. Now, as with the other sessions, this session is being recorded and will be emailed out with the slides that you're now seeing on the screen. The other thing is too, if you're just coming in for the first time today into this webinar 6, There may be some things that we touch on that perhaps because you weren't in the previous sessions, maybe you don't understand. It's really important that you watch these webinars in order as they've been recorded. So before the next webinar, please go back and, if you get the time, go through and watch those previous ones so that you can actually understand some of those concepts that we might touch on today. All right. So learning outcomes for today's session, as I said, the first one, which will be taking you through regarding the routing functionality, just a bit of an overview in the portal, and I suppose from a, more so from a road manager perspective, looking at some of the, we're just going to touch on, I suppose, the responsibilities and those are contained within the guidelines for granting access, which are freely available on the NHVR website and have been for some time. So, but there's a couple of elements there we just want to reiterate, and importantly, a bit of a demo in terms of how you actually do an alternate route, which, as I said, can be a little bit tricky from time to time. And then, as I said, I'm going to then talk about future functionality. So, digital asset management. What does that mean? Well, you'll find out very shortly, but it does provide a bit of a window into where we're going, particularly around some of this capability with bridge assessments. And then secondly, some of the other products that are in development. So one being a rapid assessment tool, and secondly, excuse me. Secondly, our new digital product in terms of way to go. So that'll be the future of where we go in terms of our routing capability. So important that we give you a bit of an insight into what's happening in those areas. All right, okay. I think that's about me done for this initial part. I'll hand over to Will. Over to you, mate. You're on mute there, Will. It was bound to happen.
Thanks, Todd. Good day, everyone. As Todd has introduced, I'm Will Beaumont. I work in the access team across a number of classes, and I'm virtually one of the ones that help customers and road managers with applications going through. Today, we're going to look at a couple of routes being appropriate for a vehicle, specifically where the vehicle crosses bridges or culverts in the requested routes. This could be in order to connect to a state road network or in order to get to a destination within their freight tasks on their application. So we'll be looking at a scenario, how to review the route and the network-wide benefits of that route. Also, if you're not able to provide access across an asset, we'll look at how to suggest an alternate route within the NHVR portal and the process that takes. Now, today, we're not going to touch on conditioning or granting access past that point. There'll be a whole session dedicated to this next week, I believe Tuesday, going over the conditions and granting access across the road assets. So there's a number of aspects to consider when we're assessing routes for access. And while NHVR and other road authorities and third-party individuals play a role in assessment or guidance or assisting road managers with their decision, at the end of the day, the ultimate decision lies with you as the road managers. So looking at why we would look to grant access on your roads, there's I guess the guidance for efficiency and productivity. We're looking at safety, we're looking at your assets, we're looking at the vehicles themselves, the assessments that have been undertaken, and how we can better improve the freight tasks within your councils using all of those tools that are available for you. So here on this screen, we're showing the permit workflow. So you're probably very well aware, working within the portal, how it works, but we just wanted to clarify the workflow. So the customer would complete the application and lodge it via the portal. And the portal is the means of each, I guess, stakeholder or individual to have the same platform. So the industry, the regulator, and the road manager, we're all working within that same portal, and we're seeing different things, different sides of the same application. So the customer would submit their application. We would then start an assessment on that application, and we may send information requests back to the customer to clarify on a few things before we would send it to the road managers. This is just to make sure that they have the required information for you to make an accurate and sound assessment. So as per the HVNL, we would then send it to the road managers and you would start your assessment. Within that assessment of the application sent to you, you may require additional information from the customers or potentially from us as a regulator. So there are information requests that you can send to the regulator or the customer, and within that selection drop-down box in the portal, it will indicate who that information request will be going to. It will either state customer or regulator. One of the options obviously being an alternate route, and we'll touch on that just after. It may have a few different levels of verification. So sending through to us or the customer, you would then get the information you require and give you the enough understanding to be able to apply your decision. We would then receive those decisions and issue the permit, either the permit or a refusal document, whichever document that is finalized after the decisions have been made. So for the customer information requests for an alternate route, there's a few verifications that don't just go through to the customer. So when the road manager creates an alternate route, it then goes through to the NHVR and we will verify that route before having the customer confirm it. There are a number of reasons for this. If it has an adverse effect on another road manager, it may not be accepted and sent back to you to have another look at the route itself or have another decision. If we verify that route and say that it's good to go, it will then go to the customer for their confirmation. And after the customer has confirmed that, it will come back to the regulator to verify their response. Once the regulator has verified their response and we accept it, there's a few things that we need to update before you see the amended route on the application. So if there's a little bit of a delay, don't worry, you're not still to assess the current route. It just means that we need to verify a few things and update some information before it gets regenerated. What we need to do is change the roads, accept the route, and update that list. So it will be regenerating consent to you with the updated list of roads within your road manager boundary. So there's a few different options for permit applications when you're making your decisions. You can grant without conditions. This would just mean that you're happy with the conditions that have already been applied by the regulator or other road managers or jurisdictions, and you're happy to grant consent without any additional conditions. Granted with conditions, where you can reduce the time frame that has been requested, or you can add any additional standard conditions or custom conditions that you may have, or you can issue a refusal. Now the refusals need to have a valid reasoning under the HVNL, and I believe that'll be touched on a little bit next week when you're going over the conditions. In any of these three states, you also have the option to provide an alternate route if that's going to help with your decision making. So we're going to jump in now and do a couple of demonstrations in regards to the routing scenarios that we've talked about. Oops, oh, I changed screens. I'm just going to stop sharing so I can change screens here for a sec. Is that good there? Can everyone see that screen?
Yeah, yep, that's great, Will, thank you.
All right, so here's a couple of scenarios. This particular out here has come to Cessnock City Council for assessment. We're going to look at this as a whole, as an accepted route. So all the information that you have to assess should be within this application. You have all of your vehicle information in regards to masses, dimensions, load types. You may have, depending on the vehicle type that has been sent to you, axle mass breakdowns. It could be a performance-based standard vehicle, which would have all of the vehicle information in the vehicle approval, or it could be a class 2 type or class 3 type with the relevant information needed for your assessment within the case. On the first page in your case details, you have an overview of the route. You also have a short description. You have your conditions tab, and if you drop that down, you can see any of the conditions that have been applied prior to consent being generated to you as a road manager. As a regulator, we do apply standard conditions prior to sending it to you. And if you have any concerns with this, you can verify these conditions and see what is already applied. If there's any attachments that would help support the request for access, these could be found on that front page also. So while assessing the route, you can't zoom in and out on the route until you click that Start Assessment button. Once you've clicked the Start Assessment button, you can start zooming in and out and have a better look at what is being requested. You have your list of roads that shows the roads listed by your council. You can see here some of these roads come up with unknown, or it may have an incorrect name. You are able to update that information either with a note or by sending us, I guess, an email to update that for you. You can have a look at the distance if that's applicable. And there's also a list of layers to help assist in your assessment. The layers can be accessed either by the Layers tab or by this hovering over this little toggle here in the top right-hand corner of the map. When you're in the Layers tab, down the bottom you have a Show All Layers option. That's not working. Sorry, it's taking a little bit of time. There we go. When you click that Show All Layers, these network layers or other layers are to assist you with your assessments also. It could include bypasses, council boundaries, state road networks, or any other networks. One of the layers that is available for you also is the local government assets. And this is what we're going over today, just showing these assets here. When you click on the asset itself, so you can see that this is using one of the council roads. When you click on the asset, when using that layer, you have additional information in regards to this asset. And when you click on the More Info link, it will take you to the bridge assessment that was performed in regards to that particular asset. In providing all of that information, we're hoping for you to have a sound understanding of what is required when you make your decision. Todd, did you want to touch just on the RAT assessment tool, or is that not available yet?
So that one there, the RAVRAT assessment tool, that's just a link at this stage. The one I'm going to be talking about a little bit later is what we're calling the rapid assessment tool. So they're a little bit different. So I will make that distinction a bit later as to what we're talking about there.
After making your assessment of your route and your vehicle information is when you would make your decisions. Now, like I said, we won't go over this today because you'll have a whole session on that next week. The next scenario we would be looking at, it's the same vehicle, same information, but it's a different route. And on this particular application, after doing our initial assessment and having a look at our assets, we would like to propose an alternate route. So there's a number of ways that you can manipulate the map. One of these ways is by dragging and dropping the route to the road that you would like it to move on. Now, as you can see here, this has gone to waypoint number 3, and it's out of order. So that's not exactly how we want it to work. You have the ability to rearrange the order for your waypoints. So if you were to change that there, you can see that route has gone the way that we desired it to go. On this little toggle on the map, if you click on that, you get a cross, and when putting waypoints on the map, it will continue to add those and you can manipulate the mapping. If there's waypoints on there and you've added too much, you can also go through and delete those waypoints. You can save this as you go, or you can make all the changes you require and then save. Once you've saved this alternate route and you're happy with that, in the route history, it will come up with an alternate route and a number. So here you can see we've saved it as an alternate route, and we would go to the case management tab, to the requests, and send an information request, alternate route proposal for confirmation, and we would select whichever alternate route we're wanting to send. You have a free text comment box here as well, so if you needed any additional information sent to the customer clarifying as to why you would like it to go that way, you can input that information here. You also have the ability to attach a file that may support this request. After submitting this request, it has come through to the regulator for verification. And if it doesn't have an adverse effect on another road manager, we would accept that response. And that's gone through to the customer. Once the customer has responded, we would accept that and it would go back to the road manager. All of the consent case statuses are color coded, and you can see by those colors who the case is sitting with, either with the regulator, the customer, or yourselves as road managers. Just gonna jump out. So while you're assessing your routes, please note that there's approved guidelines for granting access that are available for you. There's an e-learn that's available for this information, and the link is provided here. Back to you, Todd.
Thanks, Will. And just on that, thanks for running through that. And I think again, you know, as you're demonstrating when you're changing those routes, there's a couple of clicks there that if you don't select the right icon, they can be a bit tricky and can throw it out a little bit. So I think that's probably very useful for people to see how to work through that. It's always good to have that reminder. The other point was around that. Sorry, mate. Yep.
Sorry, Todd. Just on touching that, if ever you are manipulating your maps and you're having trouble, we do have individuals available for your assistance. Please don't hesitate to give us a call and we can help you through any troubles that you're having.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Will. Good to know that that help is at hand if any of the road managers need it. The other point I was just going to make with those guidelines for granting access, with the work that we're doing on the SLGAAP project, we're going to look to update that document and to include some advice around the bridge assessment space. So initially it'll probably be something fairly brief, but we just want to flag and bring that into that process in terms of, you know, it's another consideration that the road managers should look at, and just a bit of guidance around how to do it. All right, so future functionality. So we've seen a little bit about how the portal runs at the moment. Where are we going? And I guess in particular, the work that we're doing with bridge assessments, how that influences some of the changes that we're looking at making. So I'll take you through that now. So, and look, Will did touch on this when he was looking at that route and actually clicked on the asset. So you now know, and just again a bit of a reminder that we've got this layer that we've created, and specifically this layer has been created to store that data around the individual assets. And also as Will showed, you can access some of the detail of those reports. I guess one of the things that we need to give more consideration to is what we actually display, because you probably can't see the detail of what's on the screen there in the bottom right hand corner, but I suppose you can see enough to know that it's pretty complicated in terms of the results that we get. So by making that information available, how do we then utilise that information? So we need to give some more thought to what we actually display there. So we'll be seeking feedback from road managers around what's actually useful in terms of displaying that information. As we do more and more of these assessments and build up that asset data, there'll be more and more dots on that national map that you can see at the top there. So that'll continue to build as we do these assessments, as I said. All right. So moving along, that's the dam functionality. Now, this is the one I think it's really, really important. And you might recall in the previous webinars that Neil Lake has made reference to a rapid assessment tool. So we've done some work with our partner ARB to actually create a prototype tool. We've only just got that tool just this week, and we're going to be doing some testing and running it through its paces before we start to share that around. Excuse me. The beauty of this is that what we're hoping we're going to be able to do is build this tool into the portal. And then when you get an application like the application that Will's just run through, you can actually use this tool to check and see whether that vehicle's, you know, how that performs in relation to that particular asset. Now, obviously, for us to be able to do that, we need the details of the assets in the portal. So if we've got those details, you know, all the different dimensions about that structure and some other details which Neil would have covered in the previous webinars, then we're able to run those assessments. And I think that's going to be really, really helpful, not only for road managers, but also if we get it right back to the start of the application process, where we can have operators having a look at that, maybe running that tool. And that way, they're less likely to lodge applications for vehicles that aren't going to be suitable to travel on a particular route. So really, really important piece of capability that we're building. And as I say, we've only just got that, so we're going to be working through that and working with our NHVR Portal team to build that into the system. So that'll be really good. All right, so I guess, look, this is just a little bit of detail, as I was saying, in terms of how this tool works at the moment. As you can see, it's basically laid out in the format of a spreadsheet. There's quite a bit of data that's got to be input into this, as I said, around the asset itself, but also the vehicles. Really, really important that that information is put in there. And a little bit of time, depending on the complexity of the structure, depending on how many vehicles you're looking at, a little bit of time to put that information in. But once you do, it's very, very quick to run. So we're going to be playing with that. How it looks eventually in the portal, obviously it'll be different. It probably won't look like a spreadsheet, and hopefully a little bit more user friendly. But that's effectively the detail that's had to be created here. And there's quite a lot of calculations that are going on behind the scenes in order to make this tool run. So may look reasonably simple on the surface, but quite complex in the background. Excuse me. All right, we'll keep moving now. So that's the rapid assessment tool, which we're pretty excited about, and we're very keen to work on that and make it available to road managers as soon as we can, and we may even get some of you to put it through its paces as well. I think that'd be really, really helpful. All right, just a slight change. I want to talk about the NHVR's National Spatial program. What does that mean? Basically, it's the mapping. Okay, so as Will showed you before, currently we've got the route planner that's embedded within the NHVR portal. So it's one of a number of tools that make up our spatial tool set within NHVR. NHVR has made a commitment to go down the path of replacing our underlying spatial tools, and there's a whole bunch of reasons why we're doing that. For those of you who've played around with the routing, as Will showed before, I'm sure you've had some fun trying to get those routes working properly. And there's some fundamental things that don't support not only our business needs, but also for road managers and for operators. And I suppose a good example is the way in which the routing works at the moment is that it actually routes by the quickest journey. Now, as we know, and as Will showed from the layers, there's a whole heap of different networks out there. So if you've got a particular vehicle and there's a network for it, it would make sense that the routing tool would snap to that network and try and utilise the network rather than going by the quickest route. So there's some of the things that we want to look at changing through the spatial data program. We're making a fairly big decision here in terms of we're moving away from proprietary products to open source, and in particular we're using OpenStreetMap, or OSM as it's referred to. The product that we're creating on the back of OSM is called Way to Go, and I'm sure that some of you have already been involved in some webinars and other information sessions about it and seen some demonstrations. We're not going to do that today, but there is that opportunity if you're more interested to get involved. And certainly the spatial team is working with a lot of road managers and jurisdictions and other agencies nationally to try and get this so that we've got effectively all the data we need in the one location, and that it's dynamically updated. We're not waiting. I think one of the issues we have at the moment, and Will, I'm sure you're overly familiar with it, is that we get new roads and new streets created, but that data doesn't come through for maybe a couple of months into our system. So when you're trying to route along those routes that exist out there on the ground, they don't exist in the system. Some of those issues are going to be overcome very, very quickly moving to this spatial program and the tools that will be used there. So that should be up to date in terms of that information. So that's a really massive improvement for everyone. I think that'll take away a whole heap of angst that we currently experience. So anyway, look, just wanted to touch on that briefly. That is coming. There'll be more information about it. And certainly jump onto the NHVR website if you're wanting to know more about that spatial program. All right. So probably just the last thing I wanted to touch on here again, and I'm giving this a plug in every one of our webinars, are the SLGAAP project resources. So we're developing this Road Manager Toolkit. So as we go along, everything that we learn, the different templates that we're creating around the bridge assessments, the assessment framework, these webinars, all that material becomes resources for you. And we're storing that within our project website, which you see on the right-hand side of the screen. If you haven't already registered, by all means, jump onto that site. You see the address there at the bottom, the nhvr.engagementhub.com.au. Jump in there and register, because that's where you'll find all the information, including this Road Manager Toolkit, about the project. All right, so I think that just about covers the content today. I guess, as I said at the start of the session, a bit of a change from the last few sessions where we started talking about some of the technical details around bridge assessments. And I guess what we wanted to do here today was start to, I guess, bring those two worlds together between those technical assessments and your actual consent decision-making process. And I guess the key message is that those reports, that information that you get through a bridge assessment, is another input into that process, something for you to consider as well. So hopefully that starts to give a bit more of an idea as to how those things come together, where you can access that information in the portal, as Will demonstrated through that assets layer. And obviously this is just the beginning, because we need to give more consideration and explore further how you actually take those results and work that into your access decision making. So this is just the start of that journey. All right, so that's just about it. If you've got any questions, please drop them into the chat now, and we'll jump to them in a minute. Just while we're doing that, while you're having a think about the questions, the next webinar is on the 27th, so that'll be webinar 7. So hopefully you can join us for that. If you haven't registered already, by all means, jump on to the Engagement Hub and register through there. All right, let's have a look, see what questions we've got here so far. Question from Claude. G'day, Claude, how are you going? Or maybe it's just a comment. In changing a route within my own area, if another road manager has approved the route before I have, I'm required to refuse the application even though the route does not affect another road manager. To avoid this, I call or get the applicant to call NHVR to make the alternative route active. Will, can you talk to that one?
Yeah, good day, Claude. If you're wanting to change an alternate route, now when I said it had an adverse effect on another road manager, this could mean that they've already started their assessment, or if they've already granted a decision. If it doesn't affect them whatsoever, so if it's come into your council at point A and point B, and you've changed the route within your council to go, instead of a straight line, to go up and around, and it's only affecting your roads, there's no issue with that. If it changes any other road manager's roads, meaning it's adding to or removing, then it's an adverse effect on their decision making. We are able to do this, but there would need to be correspondence, written correspondence between yourselves and the affected road manager, and we would assess it on a case-by-case basis.
Thanks, Will. Hopefully that helps, Claude. Otherwise, perhaps if not, you can follow up afterwards after the webinar. Thanks, Claude. Vikram, please show the Engagement Hub page. Wasn't able to write it down. we can drop the link. I'm not sure if Linda's still there, but we can drop it in, or otherwise, if you just want to splash that page up again, Will, with the engagement hub, that last page that we had. I'll jump on here to Emily's question. Will part of the mapping upgrade allow road managers to mark roads as less preferable to use by the route planning tool? For example, roads with bridges or high public amenity concerns. Excellent question, Emily. I guess I don't know whether that one's actually been flagged, but again, that could become potentially some sort of layer. But look, I think it's a really good point, because as we go through this process and as we become more as we understand our network better, including through these bridge assessments, I think it's going to help us really identify what are those preferred routes. So I think it's definitely something that we can look at as we do these assessments. And I'm not sure which council you're with, but if we're working with you and we find that some of those results are not supporting access across the structure, then part of our conversation will be to look at what might be a preferred route for those particular vehicles within your area. Alternatively, if it's fine, then that might actually be the preferred route. So yeah, really good question, Emily. It's certainly where we need to go, I think. All right. Have we got any other questions? Any last questions? Okay, so Rob, would it be possible to incorporate some sort of cross road manager communication system into the case management system of the portal rather than having paste in emails, etc.? Will, can you comment on that one at all from Rob?
Yeah, Rob, I didn't think of that. There's no current functionality for that, but I'm going to make a note and see if that's something that we can look into.
Yeah, I'm casting my mind back, Will, because I think it's something that was, it certainly has come up previously. I know in my time when I was working on the portal, that was something that was raised. It's been a while, so I just can't recall what the situation is with that. But yeah, if you can just make a note, that'd be great. Thanks, Will. All right, Jim, will previous page, please, and move up away from tool. So if you can go to the previous slide. Thanks, Will. Carmen, when identifying a road with an incorrect road manager, does it change it permanently? So Will, I think that might be one for yourself. When identifying a road with an incorrect road manager, does it change it permanently?
Yes and no is the short answer. The longer answer is yes and no. When we identify a road that's within a wrong road manager, we will update it to have the correct road manager before sending it to consent. Sometimes it is not picked up. If this is identified from you or from another road manager, we're quick to replace it. However, because that functionality is there and it's pulling data from other sources, just because it's been replaced on one application doesn't necessarily mean it's going to update on the other application. Moving forward, if we've changed it on application 1, any application after that should be corrected. However, if there's been 5 applications that have gone through at the same time and 4 of them have the incorrect one and one's been updated, that incorrect information will override the correct information. There's too much data happening within that one space to say this one change will affect it forever. But looking at the future projects within the mapping areas, they're looking to have fixes to this problem and have more ability for the road managers to be updating those assets within that mapping tool.
Yeah, that's exactly right. While it doesn't help people now, certainly that's one of the issues that we're hoping we're going to address to a large extent. Because the data is going to be more correct to start with, and secondly, it can be updated a lot quicker, as I described before. We're not waiting potentially for months for that information to come through. All right, okay. So that answers all the questions that are on there. We might just give that one more minute in case anyone had a final question. Oh, here we go. So Vikram, we keep getting requests to issue permission for all the roads within within a local council area. Is this in this case we reject and ask for a specific route? The information gets rejected from NHVR. Will?
So depending on the type of vehicle, they can request all roads within your council boundary. Sometimes we will send them back and say, you cannot request all of these roads. You need to approach the council directly and request a, what is it, the approval letter, a council approval letter for all roads. Now, we won't reject it back. If we've requested all roads and you've come back to NHVR and said, no, we won't assess all roads, we won't stop you on that. If you're requesting the customer to have a specific route, we will put that back to the customer for a specific route.
I think if I can just add to that, Will, you know, it's something that NHVR has been conscious of, I suppose, since get-go, since the first day we started. There was a behaviour within industry, and obviously it still exists to an extent, where people would just go and request all routes. And our advice has been since that time to say, request the roads you need. Don't just request everything, because the thing about that is, exactly in the circumstance you're talking about, Vikram, is that potentially it might be only one of those roads out of the whole thing that gets rejected, then the whole application's rejected potentially. So why do they want to have that risk? So we encourage them to apply for the roads that they need rather than just applying for everything. I think that's still the advice to industry pretty much, isn't it, Will?
Yep. So Vikram has said, unfortunately, our predecessor had issued permission. Okay.
Yeah. Is there anything you can add to that at this stage, Will?
Also, just depending, look, if a council has granted all roads previously and the customer comes through with a renewal for that, or another customer is requesting the same access, it doesn't stop your decision making. Just because something was right once doesn't mean it's always right. Roads change, your assets change, your assessments change. You're progressing and improving with your assessments of your council roads. Just to say that it was approved once doesn't necessarily mean it's always going to be that same level of access.
Yeah, good advice, Will. It's an evolving thing, isn't it? And Jim's comment there is as well, you know, some of these roads, even our service vehicles like garbage trucks have problems getting down. How is a PBS vehicle going to get along them? Exactly right, which, you know, as I say, again, the advice that we put out to operators, to industry, is to only apply for the roads that you actually need.
And that is dependent on the vehicle types as well. You know, I don't personally see a lot of applications for approval letters from Class 1 OSM vehicles. You'll get some cranes, a lot of the smaller trucks. I don't see a lot for PBS, but it does happen because they talk within the industry. So someone will say, I have this, or I've had this, and they'll want that same access. Yeah, taking it on a case-by-case basis is the best way. Like I said, just because access has been granted previously doesn't necessarily mean that it's always going to be granted going forward.
And I think in terms of getting ahead of this, despite the fact that we, you know, we obviously process these applications one by one, and NHVR puts advice to industry about applying for what you need rather than what you want. I guess back to Emily's point earlier, it is about getting across and understanding how we want our network to function and what we want running where. And the better we all understand that, the less of these issues we're going to have. Jim, just a comment there about some previous approvals were granted by RMS RTA, not council. Yeah, so obviously historically, you know, sometimes those issues don't help, but as Will pointed out, it's an evolving thing. So, you know, we keep moving depending on what's appropriate to be approved on the network. All right, so that looks like we've pretty much addressed all the questions that have come through. So thanks very much for everyone putting those through. Some really good questions there. And thanks for attending today. Thank you to Will for joining us for today's webinar and getting across that access side of things. I think again, from the questions that have been asked there, clearly, you know, there's still a lot of support that road managers need. So definitely appreciate having you on the webinar today, Will.
Thanks,
All
Tim.
right. Thanks very much, everyone. So look, we might leave it there. We'll look to our next webinar, webinar 7, which will be next Tuesday, the 27th. Hopefully we'll see you then. Thanks very much for your attendance, and bye for now.